So just while we're assembling, can I just remind you of how this is going to work? It'll be the usual hand up from the audience. Please join us around here. And if you could kindly wait for the microphone, because we are still filming and still recording. Say who you are, please, who you're associated with. And then if you could keep your questions both brief and singular, then that would be great. I did ask, actually, I did ask the organisers to give me a warning if we were running late on the discussion session, but I wasn't quite as anticipating that warning, but nevertheless, rather nice start. So, if we could have the first question from the audience, please. Yes, please, Mike.
Mike Revitt, Middlesex University. It's a very general, non-technical question. But we've had presentations this afternoon, interesting presentations, thank you very much, from about both the SUDS manual and about the BEST tool. What I'm sitting here thinking is, do they interact in any way? For the reader reading one of these documents or acquainting, how do they get information that interacts between the two? Because they are important in that extent that they should interact in some way. Maybe it's a question to Syria.
Okay, well, let's. Steve, do you want to start the ball rolling on that one? Just to drop you in it?
I haven't got a clue.
How do they all interact together?
No,
Bridget, do you want to have a go? Oh, no, go on. You're looking particularly eager here.
Well, I can do better than I haven't got a clue.
Well, that's a relief.
There is a chapter on costs and benefits in the SUDS manual, and the benefit assessment side is described qualitatively and generically, but the user is referred to the BEST tool to get what they need.
Okay, Chris, you've been involved with BEST, so do you just want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, actually, I mean, in the same way, we actually included the pointers back actually into the SUDS manual for actually where that actually links, and actually because we're actually writing actually at the same time, just yours was a bit more of a beast in terms of size.
You're getting there with that name.
Yes, just in terms of actually size. I think there was actually the writing at the same time, so that's actually made it actually easier to actually fall in together.
Okay, we'll take another question then from the floor, please. Yep.
Thanks very much. Martin Kelly, I'm the founder and chair of the Trees and Design Action Group. Fantastic presentations, a lot of talk of landscape and green infrastructure. I just wondered if the panel could say a little bit more about the importance of urban tree cover in our urban areas and the benefits that provides to the SUDS agenda.
Okay, urban tree cover. Sue, do you want to set the ball rolling on that one?
Yes, why not? Well, I'm completely in agreement with you, Martin. It is of huge benefit to us, and I think we can all understand quite easily, the issues in terms of improvements to air pollution and urban heat island effect, but clearly amenity, biodiversity, you name it, it can do it. And obviously with the guidance and the Trees and Design Action Group booklets, Trees and Hard Landscape, which aligns very much with what's in the SUDS manual itself, showing how we can use trees and, whatever the soil mediums you want to use, but to facilitate SUDS as part of planting them. And in a way, I think it's one of the easiest solutions to do. And, I said about highways, it's one of the things that is acceptable as well. So I think the importance of tree cover is universal, and, aligning it with SUDS is absolutely fundamental.
Okay, Tamasine, do you want to just add to that? Because you give some nice images about urban design and things. Do you want to talk about the link between trees and urban design a little bit?
I think it's this fundamental link, really. Crikey.
Do you want to lean forward just a little? There are the mics.
It's a fundamental link, and I think all our projects now is that we're starting to use combined tree trenches that actually act as functional drainage. But it's also down to the specification of the soils, and it's down to the tree species. One, that you want the tree to be able to function within that trench, but it's also that it's a legacy tree, something that's going to grow big and grow beautiful.
Excellent, fine. We'll move to another question from the floor now, please. Yes, the gentleman down there.
Anthony McCloy Consulting. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of bring it back to reality slightly in terms of myth busting. Steve, you're quite eloquent in what you said. For me, there's still quite a large barrier, and it's nothing to do with the technical challenge. It's quite a bit to do with a cultural mind shift, and it's inertia. People are resistant to change. They've been doing things a certain way for the last however long they've been doing it. And our culture and our industry and the way we tender and the way we price to do design work very much is about how can we do it quickest in terms of design without any real forethought as to how we implement. So that's my personal opinion as to one of the main barriers that might be left. The question to the panel is really what other barriers do you think there's out there in terms of what do we need to really break down? In terms of, we put lots of excuses, but what are the underlying reasons as to why things aren't changing?
Okay, I am going to send this one to you, Steve, this time. And please just don't deal with the other barriers. But you might want to come back and challenge the first point as well, if you can manage to get in between the helicopter. Okay?
Right. Yeah, you're right. There is a cultural issue in developers and the construction industry, without a doubt. And I think the other, well, there are two main issues that I see as still key barriers. The first is that we need an education programme for the wider public. It's all right us having a nice chat amongst ourselves, but until we sell it to the wider public and there's a sustained education and information programme for those people so that they're asking for it, then we're not going to get a long way, I don't think. And the other thing is adoption. The one thing that the Floods and Water Management Act would have done with the SABs would have dealt with the adoption issue. And until we deal with that, you can design around it, but we end up with these schemes like you've seen and we've seen that leave a lot to be desired, and a lot of that stems from adoption issues and the fragmented ownership of the drainage system that we have in this country. So really we need a whole-scale reassessment of what the legislation is really around drainage assets in this country. And that's a difficult one to do.
I wonder if perhaps I could bring you in as well, Bruce, because there is a cost argument in here, isn't there? You know, we keep hearing about this, and I thought you talked very eloquently about the cost-benefit dimension, but let's just focus on the cost bit of this for a minute in the context of the question.
I was going to say something else, actually.
Well, then,
is that all right?
No, that's all right. No, Bruce, say something else, please. Sorry, I was... But if you can come back to that point, that would be great.
I'll have a think about that while I'm talking. All right. I was just going to make a point about language, because I think it's a terrible thing to say when we're launching the SUDS manual, but we need to stop talking about SUDS and drainage, because that just turns people off. I think we need to talk about people and places, and that's what people are interested in, is kind of where they live, and we get bigger benefits if we improve the places where people live. So obviously we need our own language for our own technical purposes and audiences, but we need to start understanding and talking to people in terms that they want to talk to us in.
Okay, thank you. That was actually a really good point. So I'm glad it was much better than the one I was trying to make there. So we'll go. So I'll just stick with taking the questions from the audience, and I'll take this one from the. Oh, sorry, I will come to you in a minute. Let's take the one from there because the mic's a little nearer. Then we'll come down to the front.
Chris Leeson, Taylor Wimpy, and thank you again for the presentation. It's really good. So, Steve, this is where a developer comes back at you. We take the point with regards to land take, but traditionally, pipes under roads and what have you would not take land take, and if you're going into new sort of trains, it would be land hungry, and we do have a problem with that. However, if you've got a local authority and a planning authority who have initiative, and this is where Tamasine is coming from really, you can use amenity within those facilities and then use those as public open spaces and the like. Coming on the last point, though, for us developers, the biggest issue is this adoption issue, and that's what we've got to tackle. And it really is down mainly to the highways and the highways adoption, because a lot of this comes under their domain. So it's really how we roll that out with the highways and how we actually sort of make the SUDS manual part of their manuals, because there is a change philosophy got to go ahead here. And that's perhaps a matter for discussion of the panel.
Okay, well, I'm just going to come back to you, Steve, on the first point, which was about, and maybe Sue as well, just about where the land take issue, and then maybe Bridget, you might want to field the last part of the question in relation to highways manuals. Could you have a go at that? Go on. Well, let's just to let you think about that. We've got
I think we're agreeing. What you're saying is that you need to use the space, the open space that you've got, and use that as part of the SUD system, so you're not needing extra space. And if you do that, then that is fine, and that's what I'm getting at, that you need to have, these spaces can't just be SUDs and they can't just be public open space. It's one and the same. As soon as you have to start putting extra space in, to put an extra pond in or an extra basin, without a doubt you are making SUDs really, really expensive. And there is, there's an issue for local authorities that they've got to start understanding that. But I'm sure Sue will speak on this, that those spaces, even though they're part of the drainage system, have got to be designed as open spaces as well, so that they're usable and they look good for the people, and people actually want to live around those spaces. That's really, really important. All the evidence from all around the world is if you put nice SUDs in, people will want to live around it. If you put horrible ropey looking stuff in there, then people won't want to live around it, and they'll want it filling in very, very quickly.
Okay, Sue.
We've actually worked on a study some years ago which looked at how you integrated SUDs within the master planning process. And what we looked at in particular was housing developments of 40 dwellings per hectare, on the basis that that was a fairly sort of standard number that was relevant. And it was quite easy to demonstrate on a range of different sites that we could achieve that sort of density whilst integrating SUDs within the public open spaces and the roads. No problem whatsoever.
So just let me press you, because I think it's a really, really important point where there's a lot of misunderstanding. Are you actually saying that with good design, there's absolutely no reason why we can't fit SUDs within the normal space requirements for open space and highways? Is that what you're actually saying?
We actually looked at 2 sites that were allocated already and then worked to those parameters, 40 dwellings per hectare. Could we do it? And the answer was yes, we could.
Yeah, so the answer is actually yes.
It is, but I think, yes, let's go for it. We're going for yes,
all right,
definitely.
Okay.
We can do it.
It's because I think I think that was a really, really important part of your question. I think it's a really, really important point for developers.
But you've got to start with the master plan.
Fine.
Don't try and squeeze it in afterwards.
No, okay. I think that's an important point, which is well made as well. Bridget, I know I kind of dropped you in on this, but I think the basic question is not specifically with highways, but it's how do we make sure that we align the recommendations in the SUDS manual with all the related recommendations in all the other aspects? Because you worked on a number of different guidance documents. I mean, could we do more on that, do you think, just to make sure everything's lined up? I think that's really what the question's about, isn't it? I think.
Yes, I think obviously we've got to align all our planning and design documents, and that's the whole thing is part of awareness raising and education and getting all these disciplines all thinking along the same lines. But I know that there are particular issues with highways and adoption, and I don't know whether Kevin or Bronwyn will be prepared to say anything as I'm looking at them.
Well, Bronwyn's going to get the microphone just now because she's got a question anyway. So you should. No.
She's not.
No. Sorry, I'm not going to ask you the question. No. I'm going to let you ask your question because you don't know. I'm going to move to the microphone. Just here. Thanks. No, Bronwyn's going to ask a question. I'll give you the opportunity to ask a question. If you'd like to comment to the other one, please feel free, but you're not obliged. Okay. The question then, Bronwyn. Go on.
Question. Bronwyn Buntine, Kent County Council.
Hang on, Bronwyn. I can't hear you here, so my guess is most people at the back can't either.
Shall I talk louder?
That's it. That's better.
Thank you.
That works.
Okay. This is actually a question about something that no one touched on here, because this is the launch of the manual, which is well done to everybody. 3 cheers. Is actually where we go from here, because there's been a general theme here about education and going forward and spreading the good word. But my question is, how do we do that? We now have 972 pages, I believe, something of that order, and we have a very good document. But how do we get it out into our young engineers, our young architects, our young landscape architects? Because as was pointed out to me by my colleague beside me, so we have a number of landscape architects here, we have 2 engineers, but I'm wondering, how are we going to get that word out, and how is it going to be integrated into our schools and our training and our mentoring, etc. So whoever would like to take that one, feel
Okay,
free.
I'm going to let Chris have the first go at that one. How do we get the word out there, Chris?
Thank you, David. Well, I mean, I think there's probably two aspects to this. Firstly, I think we all have actually quite a big role now. So actually everyone, not only the panel, but actually everyone within the room, because everyone has a responsibility, I think, back within their organisations to go back and, you know, it doesn't have to be a major presentation, but to actually kind of share back within the disciplines across your teams and actually make sure people are aware that this new SUDS guidance has actually come out, is available, and is free to actually download. So I think actually from the technical audience, I think that's the first key thing. I think the second thing is to actually how we can maybe use the institutions in this. It's always good to have some recent presidents surrounding you in this matter to ensure in some of the educational campaigns. I think there's actually, the Institution of Civil Engineers has regional education teams that actually go out into schools. It's maybe trying to actually get in actually through some of those kind of approaches, which actually allows us very simply, and if we've got some very simple information, to actually share with a wider audience.
Bridget, do you want to comment on that as well?
As part of the manual, there are dissemination sort of packs that Syria that we have developed with Syria, short, snappy presentations that get across the key messages and that will hopefully inspire people to go and look at not necessarily the whole manual, but parts of it that they can relate to. And the manual is separately has the chapters in the manual are separately downloadable, so you don't have to, like the last one, download the whole load at once. And the first couple of chapters will hopefully give people inspiration to look further and delve more.
Thank you. We'll take another question from the front here, please.
Luke Engelbach, Studio Engelbach. First of all, I think this is a fantastic double thing that's happened today in terms of how to do it and the cost and benefit analysis. In a way, I wish I'd had some of the cost and benefit analysis a little while ago. The question that I have relates to something that Lord Krebs said earlier, that there was a disconnect between doing SUDS and how they fit into the larger drainage system. We had a project a few years back on a brownfield site, formerly covered by a factory, where all of the water went into the combined sewer and then into the river, and then it was going to become a garden village where 60% was going to be green, but the old school engineers said, we're not going to drain any of those green areas. We had designed in SUDS throughout as an attenuation measure, but at some point that water would have to go in to get off the site, get into a drainage system to get out of the site. And I noticed recently in Portland, Oregon, that's exactly how they work. They have a domed grating over the end of of a rain garden so that excess water can go in. How do we stand, and maybe this is answered in the new manual, how do we stand in terms of getting rid of excess water into a combined system, or are we still up in the air on that one? Because it was great to hear that you can put SUDS anywhere. I've always believed that. But if we cannot get the water away, we need to find some other method to get round that very thorny issue.
Expand your question into two parts. That specific part, how do we get the excess water into combined systems? But also, how do we deal with the old school engineers? Because I'm quite intrigued with that. So I just have a personal...
Well, you've got a very big manual there, which is actually...
Personal interest in that.
Potentially...
Okay. Let's take the second one of those first. Tamasine, you must, in your sort of liberated view of the urban landscape, you must have come across the old school engineer from time to time, I guess. How have you dealt with that? How have you convinced them? Help us to understand that.
Lots of diagrams and nice images generally. I think it's controlling the flow rates, I think, has been our answer to everything, because we always end up having to do an outlet. We have very few sites, especially on urban sites, where we can infiltrate water into the ground. it just doesn't happen. And so we have to design something that can enable a control of the rate.
Precisely, but the problem is that there can be a point.
Hang on, can you just wait for the mic? By all means, comment.
I agree, but there can be a point, especially in heavy rain events, where the quantum of water will cause a problem and we have to remove it. And this is where the old school engineers in our particular problem referred it to the Water Authority as our landscaping architect wants to do water gardens that drain into your thing, which is a kind of incendiary starting point, which is not what it was about. It was all about attenuation, but there comes a point where you can only attenuate so much, and that is the issue.
Okay.
I think you do have to. Sorry, I just
Sorry,
wanna,
can you just lean forward to the mic, Tamasine, so we can hear you, especially with the helicopter. You have to shout.
We, on most of our projects, we end up within the confines of the site. We do try to accommodate up to the 1 in 100 year. And so that, for instance, we do have public spaces that will be allowed to take that exceedance. We generally don't like to use the word flood. It tends to make clients a bit nervous. And sometimes you advise the client that they need to invest in tanks. And so sometimes that is your only thing you can do. And so you are still keeping it on your site, you're slowing it down, but yes, it's under the ground, in a big tank.
But even the tanks will have to be emptied.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you just slow it down.
Let me just take quick comment from you, Stephen, a quick comment from Chris, I think. Go on.
It's quite clear in the SUDS manual that you've got to design any system for exceedance. So you can only design any drainage system to a certain capacity. And what you're doing with the SUDS is slowing it down. So it will go back into the sewer eventually, but it does it under its own steam over a slower time scale. And if you design it properly, you've got a lower volume going in there as well. So you can do it.
Disconnect where they said, thou shalt not. Sorry, where you get to a point where they say, absolutely, over my dead body, you cannot do this. This was the problem that we had. I mean, all those arguments were articulated in quite some detail.
By the old school
still,
engineers.
we were having a major problem.
Right,
can I just answer one?
You can answer that, and then I'm going to let Chris have the last word. Go
To
on.
deal with the old school engineers, that's why the SUDS manual is so big. Bash him over the head with it.
That's such a great point, Steve. Thank you. And Chris is going to make one last question as well, and then I'm going to take one last question just from the back up there.
I'm not sure I can follow that point, Steve, actually. No, I mean, I was going to say, actually, from the widespread, the water companies are now looking far more in terms of strategic drainage plans. And I think one of the challenges is actually how, if we were to start to actually redevelop, regenerate, retrofit, how we could, in the long term, keep the surface water out from going into the combined system. And I think that's actually a really important aspect in terms of planning going forward, which will take some time, as we've seen. For example, if you look at some of the long-term control plans in the United States, and it'd probably be remiss of me not to mention, actually, in Thames Water at the minute, that there is a performance commitment over this 5-year period to actually look at how they can remove or significantly slow down surface water going into the combined system. So that's something which they are now actually starting to actually look at, which one would hope actually over the years that will actually grow.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to take one last brief question. Somebody up here was trying to ask a question. There we are, young lady in the middle there, please. The last question, a brief question for some brief answers from the panel. Thank you.
Hi. Oh. Hello? Here we go. Right, hi, Dione Allen from Heriot-Watt University. Brief question, and it's looking forward, so it's a good last question. Having just created this awesome new tool and this great new manual, when we look forward to do the next ones, what are the 2 things that each one of you think that research and policy can give you? Like, what are the 2 things that are missing or that you need advanced to allow you to improve where we are now?
Okay, well, I'm just going to change it slightly. I'm just going to give them one thing, because we've got a panel of 6. You'll get 6 back then, okay? We're going to start with Bruce at the far end. The one thing you want to see research and development give you for the next manual. Bruce.
Well, we need better understanding, I think, as Chris and I both pointed out, of the links between SUDS and outcomes that benefit people and places, and some better understanding of the monetary values of those outcomes and those benefits, because we know that there are big benefits out there, but we still find it hard to articulate what those benefits are and how much they're worth to people.
Okay, Steve.
Well Paul did say there was not going to be another update to the SUDS manual.
That's not a cop-out on this question, I'll tell you now.
No, I think, I don't really know at the moment. To be honest, I think we've got to have a settling in period now using this manual and start identifying the issues that arise, because we're going to be using, people will use more SUDS because of this manual in its current format. And we really need to see what happens before we start making sort of decisions about that.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
You mentioned the word policy in there, so I'd actually like to see some research carried out starting now on the uptake of SUDS and all of the implications of why we haven't got a proper system through the full implementation of the Flood and Water Management Act. And then perhaps we could use that to try and change government's mind.
Okay, thank you, Tamasine.
It's probably going to sound a bit odd, but in a lot of our projects we combine water features with SUDS. And sometimes that confuses people, and it's also very hard for us to explain what it is. And to a SUDS purist, they look at our elements and just call it a water feature. So maybe it's actually advice on how to explain the detail and what element is doing its SUDS function.
Okay.
I find it hard to explain as well, actually.
Bridget?
I'd like to see more research and science on SUDS performance, particularly water quality performance and groundwater protection, the risks, identifying whether there really are risks to groundwater and how to manage those if indeed they exist. And then hopefully we could get some consistent regulatory policy across the UK.
Great point. Chris, last point.
So, I mean, finally, it's also kind of linked to the benefits. I think, firstly, so the monetary values and actually how we can get stronger ways to actually estimate some of the quantities in simple ways at times. So people can actually go and actually estimate the quantities easier without maybe having to do massive investment up front first to then actually help decide to go and actually put more effort into it going forward.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks very much for all the questions from the floor there. That brings us to the end of this great launch this afternoon, at least in terms of the formal part of the proceedings. I think we've explored a great range of issues during the discussion this afternoon. I very much hope you'll go away with the confidence now to drive SUDS forward even more than we've done in the past, to really gain momentum, because this is a great step forward for this afternoon, and I think a really fantastic job has been done here. I think we've actually brought some interesting points out in the discussions, and we've got some things to take away with us. I think that the point that was made, how do we now get the message out to everyone we need to get the message out to? We need to think very carefully about that and put some effort into that. We still have this rather annoying, outstanding but important point of adoption. We've still got that to deal with, and we need to be creative, I think, about how we do that. But I'm confident that what we have here in both the best tool and in the manual itself will help us enormously with that. And I have to say, just to make my third summary point here, rather taken with the idea of that, is SUDS actually the right focus? Should we be talking more about placemaking and less about SUDS? I just find that quite an intriguing point, which I'm certainly going to think about a little bit more. I think it's been a terrific event this afternoon. Can I just remind you that there will be a questionnaire which is coming out to you electronically after this event. Please do take a few moments to complete that. That will be really helpful. Today, please do return the badges before you go. We have 1 hour now with some drinks to enjoy and to network before we finally have to close the door on you. Just slightly less than an hour, because I know they're very punctual here. So I hope you will make use of that opportunity. It just remains for me to just say a few thank yous yet again. Firstly, to thank the presenters. Please do join me with the thank you them. I think they've done a really splendid job. Thanks again to the steering group who worked hard in reviewing everything. Thanks particularly to the contractors who worked fabulously well in delivering this really important piece of work. Thanks to the funders, without which it would not have happened. And thanks to Syria staff for supporting this and make sure it got through to the conclusion. And thanks to all you as delegates today for coming here today and taking part in it so enthusiastically. Hope very much we'll see you again at another Syria event. I do wish you all a safe journey home afterwards, but do please enjoy the drink, stay in network. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.